이제 많은 야채 아다 니도 실력 많은 거 야채 뜨니 아버지가
Today is the fifth day of the 2024 Marmok Summer Teachings. I'd like to offer my greetings to the members, the Sangha, the monks and nuns in the various monasteries and nunneries who are listening, as well as to all my Dharma friends, and as well as my Tibetan compatriots. I would like to offer you my auspicious greetings. You can all hear me, right? The other day we were speaking about the secret mantra aspects of practice in early Buddhism. And so I'd like to continue speaking about this topic, or the aspects of the secret mantra that are present in early Buddhism. So the terms or the words and designations that are the jargon in early Buddhism that is related to the secret mantra include the Dharani mantras, or excuse me, the protective mantras. So the Paritta in Pali. So Paritta includes mantras for one's own protection. So these are called Attaparitta. Or just in general, protective mantras, these are just called Paritta. And so what we should understand this as meaning is that there are mantras to protect oneself. And so these mantras that have that purpose or that understanding of being for your own protection were accepted in early Buddhism. That is, they were allowed. Now, as I spoke about the other day, within the Vinaya scriptures of the various schools on the Vinaya, there is discussion of the debased art, or if another way, you could also say the debased awareness mantras. And so these were prohibited, and that if you did so, there would be an infraction. And in particular, these are prohibited in the Bhikshuni Pratimoksha and the Vibhanga. It says that if you study these mantras of the debased arts, and then it becomes a downfall. So this is as it is said in the Vinaya scriptures. In any case, the debased art or the animal arts, the pointless or the useless awareness mantras are clearly prohibited in the scriptures of early Buddhism. But there are some exceptions. Now, of course, in general, the useless awareness mantras are prohibited in early Buddhism, but there are a few that are allowed, for which there are exceptions. Now, in the Pali Vinaya, the exceptions include in the 12th part of the Bhikshuni Vibhanga, in the discussion of the 49th downfall for the Bhikshunis, what it says in particular, the exceptions are learning writing or learning dharanas. So here, when you say dharana, that means learning dharanas. and learning protective mantras for protection, or learning mantras from protection. So here the mantras for protection means the parita, or the protective mantras, or alternately, when you are insane, where you're crazed or when you're not in control of your mind. And also for the very first offense. So that means that the first person who committed the offense, these are not infractions, it says. And so primarily what it's saying here is that studying the Dharani and protective mantras, you may study it for yourself, and you may also teach them to others. It's okay to teach the protective mantras of Parita to others. So this is what is said in the Pali Bhikshuni Vibhanga. At this point, it says in Pali the word dharana. So in terms of our Mahayana teachings and in our mantra teachings in general, there's a dharani mantra. So are the dharana in the Pali scriptures and the dharani in the later scriptures, are they the same? They probably are. However, when we're talking about the writing letters, the word in the Pali language is lekha. So later, there is a method called the method of the 42 letters. And so there it also speaks about letters, but the term for the letters there is lipi or akshara. So lipi or akshara. So this is the term used there. So the question, are the lipi and akshara, are they the same as the lekha in the Pali Bhikshuni Vibhanga? Question of whatever whether the same or not is not so clear. Now, we mentioned that there's the method of the 42 letters. Sometimes it's called the method of the 42 letters, or sometimes it's called the 42 ultimate letters. Within the Prajnaparamita, such as what it says is that it's talking about the 42 vowels and consonants of the Sanskrit language. And this is a method of meditating upon their upon their meaning. And so this is a method of meditating on the 42 letters that is described in the Prajnaparamita or the Avatamsaka Sutras. So in any case, it is meditating on the 42 consonants and vowels of the Sanskrit alphabet. So when you speak at the Parita in the Pali Vinaya, and say that these are allowed to practice. And so just as this is said in the Pali Vinaya, the Dharmaguptaka four-part Vinaya also says, if in your stomach or in your intestines you have a parasite that causes intestinal illness, you may recite a mantra to cure that illness. Or if you may also recite mantras to cure indigestion when there's food that you're unable to digest. And if this causes an illness, then you may also recite mantras. You might also recite mantras to learn letters. You may also use it to convert worldly non-Buddhists. So you may recite mantras to convert worldly non-Buddhists. And also, if you are poisoned, then you might recite mantras to neutralize the poison. In any case, if the mantras are for your own protection, then there is no offense. So this is what it says in the Dharmaguptaka four-part Vinaya. Like the Dharmaguptaka four-part Vinaya is in Chinese, not in Tibetan, right? Similarly, in Chinese, there's the 10-part Vinaya of the Sarvastivada school. So it is called Shiso Nu in Chinese. So it basically means the 10-part Vinaya. And what it says there is that when you have a toothache, it really hurts, right? And so there are mantras to cure toothaches. If you have a stomach ache or stomach illness, if that hurts, you have a stomach ache, then you may have mantras to cure stomach aches. And if you're poisoned, then there are mantras to neutralize the poisons. In any case, if they're in order to remain healthy physically and mentally, if you recite a mantra, there is no infraction. It is not an infraction, it says. So this is what the 10-part Vinaya of the Sarvastivada school says. Next, there are the paritas in the Pali tradition, these protective mantras. So if we speak a little bit about those. Now, within the Pali tradition, protective mantras are considered very important. In Pali, there is a scripture called The Questions of King Milinda. Milinda Panyas is the name of the text. It's a very well-known text. And so this is in the Sutra Nikaya. And so this is among the 5 sections of the Sutra Pitaka. It is in the minor discourses. In any case, there's the sutra, the Questions of King Milinda. This is a question of a dialogue with a Greek king. And so there was a very well-known text where a bhikshu and the king have a discussion and they trade question and answer. And this gives several different protective mantras. For example, mantras to protect the body. And there's a Kanda Parita. Kanda Parita. These are mantras to protect the body or the aggregates. Also, peacock mantras, which are Mora Paditas. Like we have like the our mantra of the great peacock or Mahamayuri. The mantras of the ornament of the flagpole. So the Jagga Parita. These are the ornament of the flagpole mantras. Then there are also the Atanatiya mantras, and which I will speak about this later. And then there are the Angulimala protective mantras, the Angulimala Paritta. Likewise, there's the Ratana Sutra, and several other mantras. So there are many different types of protective mantras taught here, taught there. So in this case, this King Milinda, he was in the 2nd or 3rd century BC, before the Common Era, right? So even during the time of the 2nd and 3rd century before the Common Era, there were many different mantras, protective mantras that were used, as what we can understand from this. Likewise, the modern Sri Lankan Theravada school, as well as those from Burma and Thailand, also have many more protective mantras than that. And these protective mantras are regularly recited to remove obstacles, or like we have in our Tibetan, is like to gather auspiciousness, so that is to gather wealth and auspiciousness and goodness. And also, if we think about it according to the explanations of some Japanese scholars, within the Southern Buddhist tradition, there are 29 different sutras that teach these protective mantras. And so all of these protective mantras that were already recited regularly in the 2nd or 3rd century BCE. Likewise, also by the middle of the 5th century, there are many sutras are being for remaining healthy, and also the Angula Mantra protective mantras, and these were added by that time. So next, I would like to speak about a few of the meanings or contents of some of the mantras that I've spoken before, and also I'd like to speak about their sources. Now, among them, the first of these is the Kanda Parita, or the aggregate mantra, the mantra for protecting the body. And so this is now in the Pali scriptures, there are 3 parts. The first is the Vinaya scriptures have 3 parts. The first of them is the Vibhanga, the detailed explanations, and the second is the 22 aggregates. And so there are 22 different sections. These are very similar to our Tibetan chapters on discipline and the finer points of discipline. And then there is an appendix, and so these 3 so in the second of these is the Khandaka, the aggregates, in the 22 chapters. And so this teaches several of the different protective mantras. Because in these Pali chapters, the 22 chapters, there are methods taught about how to meditate on loving kindness and compassion for snakes to protect oneself from harm from snakes. And the circumstances, and so there are mantras that one recited while meditating, and the circumstances that led to these mantras is that in the past there was a bhikshu who was bitten by a snake and died. And because of this, the Buddha said to the bhikshus, those whose loving kindness permeates the 4 royal Naga lineages will not die of snake bites, even if they are bitten by that. So even if they are bitten by snakes, they will not die if they recite this mantra. So he then taught them the verses to protect the verses of the 4 royal Naga lineages, and this is followed by a protective spell for yourself, or in Pali, Attaparitta. So Attaparitta, or it could also be called by the term of a protective spell, or paritta. And such mantras that are related to nagas or that are related to snakes come up in many different areas of the scriptures. Now, in terms of the foundation vehicle scriptures, in the Pali Vinaya of the foundation vehicle, in the Pali Vinaya, as I said before, in the 22 chapters, I said, this story so in the Palis, there's the major chapters and the minor chapters, and those minor chapters, the Chulavagga, the original story that I've just mentioned, was described. So the original form of that probably came from this Pali Vinaya text, is what people hypothesize. And the second is in the section of numerical discourses. So this is one of the numerical of the 4 agamas called the numerical discourses. And so this is called the Ahina Sutta. And so this has another more discussion of snakes. So then there's the one that's taught in the Ahina Sutra in the numerical discourses. Right, so this is the Snake Sutra in the numerical discourses. Likewise, among the Jataka tales,
I
almost got it mixed up. But the first of these, as I said, the first original source of the story is in the chapters, the Chulavaka of the Pali Vinaya. Second is from the numerical discourses. So within these numerical discourses, there is a story that is related to this. And then there is also so that's the Ahina Sutra that's in the numerical discourses. Now the third of these is in the Jataka tales and in the Pali canon. Among the five Nikayas, this is in the minor discourses, so it's in there. And the fourth is the four-part Vinaya. So it's in the four-part Vinaya of the Dharmaguptaka tradition. And it's in the 42nd fascicle of this. So among the so in the Pali text, it talks about the four royal Naga lineages, right? And in this text, it becomes the 8 Naga kings. So it's a little bit different. So the first one was in the 4 Naga lineages. So it's probably the different types of 4 types of Nagas. And in the Dharmaguptaka text, it becomes the 8 Naga kings. And the mantras protections of the 8 Naga kings are taught. And so this is a bodhicitta mantra for self-protection. You meditate on bodhicitta. If you recite it with bodhicitta, then snakes will not bite you. It's the basic way you should understand it. Now the fifth is in the connected discourses. And it's in the 9th fascicle of these. This teaches a verse for the protection for snake bites. And it also lists 8 Naga kings. Now, in the connected dorsakas, the bhikshu who is there is named the bhikshu Upasena. Likewise, in the connected discourses, after the verses, there's a Dharani mantra that is added. And so what this shows us is that at that point, it had like a mantric properties or like a form, a tantric form. And so this is very clearly visible there. And the Dharani mantra is called a protective mantra. So in Chinese, it's 咒术章助. So this is the name of the Dharani mantra. It's because this is the connected discourses in the 4 agamas is only in Chinese. So since it's translated into Chinese, then the term, instead of saying protective mantra, it says 咒术章助. 咒术 means mantra or an awareness mantra. It means the words of an awareness mantra, essentially. If you recite these words of the American awareness mantra, then you won't be harmed by a snake, as it said. The 6th the sixth scripture that is related to snakes or Vinayas is it also in the five-part Vinaya. And in the five-part Vinaya, it's in the 26th fascicle. And so this is probably the Mahishasaka Vinaya. So what is it? So there's the 26th fascicle, the five-part Vinaya, the Mahishasaka. It's also in the 20th volume of the Mahasangika. And also there's the Chinese translation, translated by Master I Ching, or which would be translated as Paramartha in Sanskrit. So there's the Vinaya of the Mula Sarvastivada that he translated, and it's in the fascicle, sixth fascicle of that. So this is in the Vibhanga. Likewise, in the Tibetan detailed explanations of Dasan, there is a story of how Bhikshu, an arhat, was bitten by the venomous snake, and in order to help him, the Buddha taught verses and a mantra to neutralize the poison. And one thing we need to pay attention to is that at this point, when the Buddha taught the verses, within the verses, there are some passages from them that we often recite when we do the name card rituals for the deceased. So when we do a name card ritual for this, we recite these frequently, right? To give an example, there's the verse, greed, hatred, and delusion, three are the three poisons of the world. The Bhagavan Buddha has no poisons. The Buddha's power destroys the poisons. And so in any case, there are verses like this for each of the Buddha, Dharma, and the Sangha. So basically, because of the power of the truth of the three truths, may the poisons be neutralized. So these are the true words that we said. And so we often recite these when we do the name card rituals for the deceased. And so these words are found in the Vinaya Vibhanga, the detailed explanations of discipline. Not only that, in our Tibetan translation of the finer point of the detailed explanation of discipline, they're also called words of the secret mantra. So it uses the term words of the secret mantra. And the Chinese translation also says secret mantra, Jin Zhou. So that actually says the actual word, secret mantra. Likewise, in the Chinese tradition, so there's a story of the Sutra of Upananda. So this is like the life story of Upananda. You could say the Sutra of Upananda. This also describes how the Bhikshu Upananda, so he was bitten by a venomous snake, and so the Buddha taught these verses and the mantra that would neutralize poison. So it's also cited in the sutra. And so the story of the snakes is taught here. Now, in terms of Mahayana scriptures, we think about the mantras that are related to snakes or nagas. Excuse me, this is discussion of these mantras for snakes or nagas in the foundation vehicle text. And so the next question is, what are the mantras related to snakes and nagas in the Mahayana and secret mantra? In the Mahayana, there are mantras for snake bites. They appear in the Sutra, the mantra of the Great Peacock King. So in the Mahayana, so there's the Sutra, the mantra of the Great Peacock King, or Mahamayuri mantra. And so they'd were taught here. And then later, when the sutra, so these are included in the sutras. And then when the secret mantra developed, they were preserved. And now in Chinese, there is a master Paramatha. And so there's a master Amoghavajra, who was born in Sri Lanka, and he went from Sri Lanka to China. And he translated a text called the Sutra, the King of Awareness, Mahamayuri, the Great Brother, and as well as many other sutras. And this type of sutra had actually already been in India for many times. So Master Amoghavajra was during the time of the Tang Dynasty, and even before him, quite a long time before him, there's a sutra of the King of Awareness, the King of Great Peacock. And so this is during the time of the Eastern Jin Dynasty. This is the king, Emperor Yuan. So he reigned from 370 to 322 of the Common Era. So this is in the 4th century. So this is during his reign. So his reign was 317 to 322. In any case, this is during the 4th century. He was an emperor during the 4th century. And there was a mantra of the king of Mahamuni of one fascal that's translated by Sri Matra, as well as the miscellaneous mantras of the king of the Great Peacocks. And so these were translated at a very early time into Chinese. This is what is said. However, the Sri Mitra's translation of the sutras of the Great Peacock are probably no longer extant. Likewise, later during the Liang Dynasty, there's a Songja Polo. There's the Sutra that taught near the Peacock King in 2 fascicles that was translated. Now in Chinese, if you total the number of translations that have the Sutra that taught near the Peacock King, there are 6 different translations of this, and including the one I mentioned before, translated by Master Amoghavajra. There's also one translated by Yi Jing, the Master Paramata. If you can total them all, there are 6 different translations of the Sutra that taught near the Peacock King. And the titles of the sutras include the word peacock. But the topic is reciting the names of the 8 Naga kings with loving kindness, and because of the power of this, preventing snake bites. And there's also a Sanskrit manuscript of the sutra that has been, and so it's written actually in Sanskrit. They've even found the manuscript for this. Not only that, they've also published it. Now, generally, when we talk about peacocks and snakes too, if you need to explain this. And the reason is that most people, it's actually that peacocks eat snakes. I don't know if they eat all snakes, but they do eat small snakes. And so for this reason, many people believed that peacocks had this a special power to overcome venomous snakes. In any case, there are 6 different translations in Chinese of the Sutra of the Great Peacock King. And what this shows to us is that in Chinese, the sutra was considered really important and very significant. And so we can gain an idea of the degree of importance it had. Likewise, it's also said in Tibetan, it's like that peacocks are not affected by snake poison. But the question of whether they're affected by snake poison or not, we can't necessarily, that is 100% true. And the reason we say that is that It's probably a question of peacocks have an ability to digest certain types of venom or of a certain quantity, not a whole lot, that they probably have an ability to digest a small amount of that. But it's probably not true that they're not harmed by any type of snake venom and probably if they're given strong poison or strong venom, then they probably would, you could say that they would be harmed by that. So it's important for us to understand this. In any case, there is some sort of limited capacity of peacocks to overcome snake poison, as scientists also say. In any case, I mentioned 7. The first 6 of these, there are 7 that I mentioned total. The first to the 6th are all sutras of the foundation vehicle, while the 7th is a Mahayana or a tantric text. And so there's a Japanese scholar, Hirakawa Akira, and in this, he says that in the sutra, there's a bhikshu named Swasti. He was bitten by a snake. And the Buddha then taught that if one recites the names of the in August Kings with loving kindness and then recites the mantra, then you won't be harmed by snake venom. And if we look at what is said, then what Akira Hirakawa thinks is that the story of the Dharani of the Mahamayuri, or the Great Peacock, appears in many different Mahayana and Tantric texts. And so the story of this, the actual event, originally came from the first form of this story. It probably came from the Pali Vinaya texts. It's that section, the Chulavagga, the section of the Kandakas, the different chapters. And it also, in the connected discourses, the 5th of these, also has a related text. And so in any case, it's the form of the story that comes from the Pali Vinaya text is probably the earliest form of this text. So this is what Hirakawa Akira says. Now there's another Japanese scholar named Matsunagi Yuke, and in his opinion, if we look among the 7 different of these versions, the one in the Mahayana and Tantric versions, so there are quite a bit in the Mahayana and Tantra, in the Mahayana and Tantras. And so those versions and the versions in the 4/6, the versions in the 4-part Vinaya and the connected discourses, these texts that are not, these are not very well written. In any case, the 7th version, the Mahayana Tantric version, the version discussion of the Great Peacock, the story of the Great Peacock, that the content of that, and the version in the connected discourses, or the version in the there's not much relation between them. It has not much evidence with the connected discourse. He didn't say that it's not with it. He said there's not much relation between the Mahayana versions and the ones in the connected. His opinion is that there were the story of, as from the first sources, it's more related to the very first one, that from the Pali Vinaya, about the story about the snake bite and so forth. Now, I don't need to explain this too much. Likewise, also in the stories of the Peacock Sutra that is described in the Mahayana and the Tantric, and there's also a story that also contains the same basic elements of the story of that. It's found in the Mulasavastivada chapter on medicine in the Vinaya texts. And there's also a Sanskrit manuscript of the chapter on medicine from the Mulasavastivada Vinaya. So there is, I'm not sure if it's a complete manuscript, but it is there. And there's also the complete chapter in medicine in the Tibetan translation. And so when we look at this teaches about the Great Peacock Mantra. So there's the awareness mantra of the Great Peacock, or Mahamayuri, and it's spread widely. It's spread widely in the southern Buddhist tradition, and it also spread widely in the northern traditions. It's very clearly. As I explained, in the southern tradition, it's described in many places in the Pali Sutras, right? In the Pali Canon. And in the northern traditions, where it's also clearly there, where it appears there is in the Mulasarvastivada chapter on medicine. Now, it's translated to Chinese, it's been translated into Tibetan, so it's in many other, these and many other texts in the northern Buddhist transmission. So if you believe this, these mantra of Mahamayuri, or Great Peacock, is very common, both the southern and the southern and northern tradition. So in Ashtadhyayi, we talk about three main traditions in the southern, the northern, and the Tibetan. And so it's in both the southern, northern, and in the Tibetan Buddhist traditions. Likewise, there are also there's another peacock mantra. There's other texts related to peacocks. In the Theravada tradition, in the Jataka tales, they have 500 Jataka tales. And among the 500 not Jatakas, there's one called the Peacock Jataka, the Mora Jataka. It's also in the Mahamora Jataka. This also describes protecting oneself from snake bite, the poison of snake bites, by reciting a mantra of the Great Peacock. In the northern tradition, that is primarily in the Chinese tradition, there is a Jataka of the King of Peacocks. So it's a story of a previous lifetime of the Buddha when he was a king of peacocks. And so this mantra is also found there. Now, the third is called the banner, the flagpole mantra. Now, in the past, what this means is that in the past, when the gods and demigods were were in battle, when the gods felt like they were losing, they would see the Indra's banner and then be inspired and freed from fear. And where the story appears in the southern tradition is in the connected discourses. So among the five Nikayas, the five sections, there's the connected discourses. The Samyutta Nikaya. Within that, there is a text called the Sagatha Vaga, the chapter and verse. Is it also in the Chinese translation of the connected discourses? The answer is it's in the 14th fascicle of the numerical agama, the numerical discourses, the story of the gods and the demigods, and the gods were feeling like they're about to lose, and then they see Indra's banner and they're freed from fear. Now we often talk about the shoulder of the victory banner. It's basically the same, I think. But I haven't had time to look at it in detail. Now, after this, the fourth type of this is Atanatiya mantra. This is the Atanatiya mantra. So Atanatiya is the name of a palace. If you translate it into Tibetan, it's Changlachengi Podangi Nga. And so this is a mantra taught by King Vaishravana to protect the Yakshas by rousing faith in the Buddhist teachings and to protect the fourfold community. The fourfold community includes the bhikshus and the bhikshunis, the monks and nuns, as well as the lay men and lay women, in order to protect them and so that they would not be harmed. So this is a mantra that was taught in order to protect them. And where this mantra appears is in the long discourses. It's the 32nd sutra of that in the Pali Canon. So in the long discourses, the Pali Canon, so the 32nd sutra is called the Atanatiya Sutra. So in general, the story about the palace of Atanatiya of the king of Yakshas, King Vaishravana, teaching the mantra to protect the mantras by rousing faith. And this story, or this also appears in the 20th of the long discourses, the Great Assembly Sutta, or the Mahasamaya Sutta. It's a very similar story. Seems to be a similar story. So some scholars say that the so this is the story that comes out of the Great Assembly Sutta. So they said the story first appeared in the Mahasamaya Sutta, and then based on it, the Atanatiya Sutta later appeared. So that's one explanation that some modern scholars say. In any case, they are in the long discourses. So in this Atanatiya Sutta, there is this Atanatiya mantra. And it seems that we have this in Tibetan too. The Atanatiya Palace, the Sutra of Atanatiya Palace is not there, but we do have this in the minor sutras and the various sutras on Prajnaparamita. In the Prajnaparamita, there is a section called the various sutras on Prajnaparamita. It's not in that. In this mantra, it's in the Theravada scriptures, and then also in the Mahayana and Tantric texts. It also appears in the Peacock Sutra, the Great Peacock Sutra, as well as the Chinese translation of the Sutra of the Great Assembly. And it's in the Chandragarbha chapter. And so it's kind of preserved there. The tradition was passed down there. So the mantra was preserved here. The Sutra of the Great, the Chandragarbha chapter of the Sutra of the Great Assembly has a prayer that we call the blaze, the blaze of the teachings aspiration that we recite at the Kajamunam. On the last day, we always recite the blaze of teachings. At the end of every day, we recite the blaze of teachings, right? The sutra that it is taught in is this Chandragarbha Sutra. So the Chinese translation of the Sutra of the Great Assembly has the Chandragarbha chapter. So that's got complete sutra. And within that, there's take the 17th section, the 17th chapter of that. And that's what's called the Chandragarbha Sutra. That chapter is actually the 17th chapter of the Chandragarbha, and it's actually called the So we talk about this Chandragarbha chapter. And its 17th chapter was taken separately. It's not the entire chapter, but within it, there's some passages from it, it seems. However, when you look at the one in Chinese, there is the complete Chandrabhava Sutra is in Chinese. There are different translations, but there's an entire one, and there's also a Chandragarbha chapter that is actually its 17th chapter that's taken separately. So the Chandragarbha chapter and the Chandragarbha Sutra are a little bit different. Likewise, in Tibetan, we don't have the entire Chandragarbha Sutra, but there is Atisha, Lord Atisha's compendium of the sutras that's in the Tanjura. In that, it quotes the Chandragarbha Sutra. It has over 11 fascicles. Now, the one that the blaze of Dharma blaze aspiration we normally recite is taken out of Atisha's compendium of the sutras, because we don't have the complete Chandragarbha Sutra. So we have extracted it from Atisha's compendium of the sutras. Additionally, in the Tibetan Kanjura, we also have the Sutra of Noble Chandragarbha. It is a sutra requested by Nubujins, which has the predictions of the manner in which the Buddha's teachings will remain and disappear. And so there's Bhutan's Dharma History says it has 2 fascicles, but these days within our Kanjura there is not that much. There's only a little bit. And perhaps so there's the complete Chandragarbha Sutra in Chinese, and it's probably a passage from that, but I'm not certain of that. It's something that I need to investigate. So as I was mentioning before, there's the Atanatiya mantra. And there's also a similar one that that was translated by Master Dharmadeva of the King Vaishravana Sutra that's very similar. And so there, the Atanatiya mantra is also shows that in any case, in the Theravada tradition, there are many paritas or mantras that give physical protections. So when you talk about mantras that give physical protection, we call them paritas. So in the Theravada tradition, there are these parita. It's clear that they call that, but in the other schools, it's not so clear that these protective mantras are called paritas in the other schools. But this term parita is really not used much in the secret mantra. So it seems that perhaps the term parito was not preserved until the time, up through the time of the secret mantra. In any case, protective mantras for physical protection were allowed to be recited in early Buddhism. You're allowed, it said you may recite them. So you're given permission to recite them. So let's leave it there. So for 30 minutes, we'll have a 30-minute break now. Now, as I was saying before, the protective mantras for physical protection, the paritas, there could possibly be a particular word in the Pali language. In any case, there are the protective mantras that you'd recite to protect your own body are called paritas. And so basically it's saying that reciting mantras to protect your own self is allowed in early Buddhism, in the scriptures of early Buddhism. For example, there are many different mantras that I just mentioned about for protecting your body that were considered very important in early Buddhist scriptures. Likewise, if you think about with snakes, if you have genuine loving kindness for snakes, then snakes don't just bite anyone. So it's important not to have any hostility. So in order for them, if you have no any hostility or no wish to harm the others, when you recite the mantra without any feeling of hostility, then that mantra will certainly have a really particular efficacy. And so those protective spells recited in this mantra are actually different than the debased arts, the debased mantras that are taught, that are prohibited in the Vinaya. Moreover, there are reasons why protective mantras were allowed in earlier Buddhism. From one perspective, it's not just the virgin, which is also medical treatments and soothsaying and so forth, and making predictions were also not allowed. But in any case, there are these protective mantras that were allowed. And so what is the reason why they weren't allowed? So if we investigate this question, there is a Japanese scholar, Matsunaga Yuke, and I think there's some importance in what he says. And the first of the main points is that he speaks about is that there's a difference between the urban and the rural. In ancient India, so in ancient India, there were differences in culture and custom between urban and rural areas. For example, in the cities, the society is a little bit more developed. There's a certain degree of development. And so because of that, these traditional awareness mantras, or this traditional witchcraft and so forth, had less influence. Whereas in the countryside, and then still, just as it had been in prior times, there are the tribal structures. There are the structures of considering clan and caste and so forth, considered to be very important. And so the same societal structures still persisted. And so the traditional witchcraft and awareness mantras were still used quite frequently, and they might have had more influence. There are many more rituals of such awareness mantras that you need to have. So that's the first difference. The first reason, the differences between rural and urban areas. Now, the second reason is the second is, if you talk about the Buddhist community, whether the monastic community or the lay community, there is the Buddhist community. And that, as it spread, and so this it also had an influence, because as Buddhism grew, it spread was first in cities, and then it spread from cities into the countryside. And within the countryside, there continually the tribal customs and the traditional customs, they are still very strong. And so they had to continue with this. And so the tribal customs had some influence on this. Now, the third reason, we're going to talk about the attitudes, the way people think, basically. There's like a change in people's attitudes. When you talk about a change in attitudes, what this says is that First, originally in early Buddhism, awareness mantras were very strictly prohibited. But later, as the teachings of Buddha spread into many different areas of India, in particular as it spread into villages in the countryside, the earlier script tradition became a little bit more relaxed. And so that's one reason. And so that's the third reason. And the fourth reason was, say the word awareness mantras, there's like an attitude towards the mantras. And there's a change in the attitude towards mantras. So the earlier attitude to mantra and the later attitude towards mantra changed. And from one perspective, from one perspective, many mantras continue to be prohibited in early Buddhism, and these included many mantras or spells that did not accord with Buddhism. Those that do accord with Buddhism were allowed. For example, the mantras that protect your own body, those were allowed. So it's not a question of all mantras being prohibited. There were some mantras that you were allowed to practice, but there were some mantras that practicing them would be out of accord with the Dharma. So this is the fourth reason. The fifth reason is that the protective mantras found in the Pali canon, the Parittas. So even these protective mantras are actually actual examples of how attitudes changed, because the Parittas are considered so important. Mantras, so it is considered very important that you could recite mantras to protect yourself. And so they also, for that reason, they appear in the scriptures of early Buddhism. So what this shows that there was a change in the attitude towards mantras. So these are the reasons given by the Japanese scholar Matsunaga Yuke. So this is so he's not only a Japanese scholar, he's also a Japanese monastic. In any case, when you think about his way of looking at it, is that the stages of the Strata Buddhism, it's like you have this shows like the adaptability of Buddhism. We can see this adaptability of Buddhism. When you talk about adaptability, it means like something to talk about the Buddhist community. And you talk about whether the monastic communities of monks and nuns or the male and female monastics. And so at the same time as the area of Buddhist influence expanded, then Buddhism had no choice but to accept the differences of traditional customs, the different societies in those areas. And particularly when it spread into the countryside. As Buddhism spread into these areas, there are many traditional mantras and witchcraft. It's quite possible that there was, I should say, that the Buddhist religion also had to be more flexible. They had used flexible methods. And they had one perspective, you had to preserve the essence of its religion. The essence of Buddhism needed to be preserved and not discarded. But at the same time, they allow you to practice a few certain types of mantras In any case, this is a very skillful means and great compassion. So, in a very skillful way, the Buddhist religion was preserved. So in any case, when we see within all these different changes, the Buddhist religion actually was able to maintain the essence of its religion, whatever that is, while at the same time being able to take a form that was appropriate to the needs of the different social environments it was in. So as Buddhism was able to preserve the essence of its own religion, but at the other aspect is it able to adapt to the cultures and the environments. So this is a particular capacity or ability of Buddhism. And so if we think about the way we can understand this is if we look at the stages of the spread of Buddhism, we think about the earlier traditions of the earlier lamas, and they had a very practical attitude to the situations that they were in. I think this shows the practical attitude. And particularly, they really practically considered how they could gain acceptance from the public amidst very different cultural backgrounds. And so then in doing there, they're able to spread the Buddhism. So they really considered this very carefully. And it's quite clear that they went to great lengths to take this into account. So next, what I'd like to speak about are true words. When we say true words, so the true words are called satyavachana, or they can be satyakiriya. It's like the true oath. So basically, when we say true words, it's like an oath or a mantra of truth. It has an inconceivable power. It has a special power. That's what we mean. And this understanding is not only a Buddhist understanding, but it is also found in the Indian Brahmanical religions. They also have this understanding and this way of thinking. Within the Pali Canon, it's called Satyakiriya. It's like these true oath, these true words. This is the term that they used. If we talk about some examples found in the sutras within the southern transmission of Buddhism, the first example is in the Jataka Sutras. As I mentioned before, in the Pali Jataka tales include 500 Jataka tales, and among them, the 444th strikes how there was a child who was bitten by a snake. Because he had bitten by the snake, his parents, the child's parents, brought him to an ascetic to ask for help. They said, "Please help my child. So please protect his life," they said. They requested this of the ascetic, who explained what he had done up to then. He'd spoken it very truthfully and honestly, straightforwardly. And he said this, and then at the end he said, "By this truth, and by what I've spoken about the truth, if this is true, then by this truth, may this child be healthy." And as he said that, then immediately the child, the poison in the child's body was then expelled, and so his life was rescued. So among the 500 Jataka tales, this is the 444th. And there are also many other accounts of such true speech in the Jatakas, and we don't need to speak about them all. So this is what's taught in the Jataka tales. Likewise, we have the Angulimala Sutta. So Angulimala, you probably have heard of him. So there's also a story related to Angulimala. Now this is in the mid-length discourses. So among the 5 sets of discourses in the Pali Sutras, there's the 86th of the middle-length discourses is the Angulimala Sutta. And in this it talks about the extremist Angulimala. He had killed a lot of people. The reason why it's called Angulimala is because he'd killed so many people. And there are the fingers of each of those. He cut off the fingers, and he'd strung them on a string that he wore around his neck. And so this is the reason why it's called Angulimala, or finger necklace, because he'd cut off the fingers of the people he'd killed, and he wore it on around his neck. And so for that reason is why it's called Angulimala, or Anguli necklace. And so he's a really frightening person. He was like a person who actually seemed like a demon, actually. So the first year was a non-Buddhist, and later he went for refuge to the Buddha, and he became the Buddha's disciple. Not only did he become a disciple, in the end, he actually achieved the result of arhatship. We talk about arhatship in the foundation vehicle. This is the highest result. It's basically the same as achieving Buddhahood for us. And once he achieved arhatship, then after that, once he went into Shravasti, so Shravasti, this is was in the past was an important city in India. It was a great city in central India. And so he went into Shravasti to beg for alms. He saw a woman who was in labor to give birth. She was pregnant, she was in labor, but she was unable to give birth to the child, and she was in great difficulty. So he saw this woman, and when he saw her, he felt incredible compassion. But he didn't know what to do, and so he immediately went back and said to the Buddha, while I was on the road, I saw this woman in labor. She's unable to give birth. She's in really a difficult situation. He explained this to the Buddha. And at that point, the Buddha said to Angulimala, you go to her and you say, since I have been born in a noble family, I have never knowingly taken any sentient being's life. If this is truth, then by this truth, may you be healthy. And so you need to recite these true words. This is the instruction the Buddha gave him. And as the Buddha instructed, Angulimala went to this woman in labor. And in front of her, he said, as the Buddha said, from the time I have been born in the noble family, that means, and from the time that I've achieved the result of arhatship, I have never knowingly taken the life of any sentient beings. And if these words are true, then by the power of this truth, may you be healthy. And when he stated these true words, the woman the woman who was in labor immediately gave birth to the child. And so Angulimala himself had actually killed many people before. Not only had he killed them, he had cut off their fingers and made them into a necklace that he wore around his neck. So he's like a really evil person. And so he'd been a really wicked man. But even such an evil person as him had gone first to the Buddha and achieved arhatship. And from the time that he achieved arhatship, he he had never taken the life of any sentient being's life knowingly. He had not even killed even an ant, any sentient being, even an ant, intentionally. Because of stating these true words, he helped this. He was able the capacity to help that woman who was in a hard labor. So he had the ability to help this woman who was in labor. Now, in the Angulimala Mantra Sutra, he tells how he spoke about said true words, but the Angulimala Sutta does not actually call them by the term true words. They're not called by that term, but there is the questions of King Milinda that I mentioned earlier. The question of the Greek king Milinda, who asked question. Then there was the bhikshu who answered the question. It's a very well-known sutta. But this does give a list of many different types of awareness mantras or protective mantras. So this is a list of all the mantras or awareness mantras that Buddhists recited. And among them, there is one called the Angulimala mantra. And so the Angulimala mantra mentioned there is can probably be identified as the one from the Angulimala Sutra that is the 86th of the minor discourses. So the true words spoken in the Angulimala Sutra. Now, the word that is used in the Angulimala Sutra in Pali is I had a bit of an internet problem. Can you all hear me? We're talking about we used to have snake charms, mantras for snakes. Now we need to have a mantra for the internet to make sure it doesn't cut off in the middle. Now, where we probably got to was I'm going to talk about the sutra, the questions of King Milinda that was from the 2nd or 3rd century BC, over the king asking questions and a bhikshu responding to him. And so this speaking includes a list of the awareness mantras or various mantras. So then one of them is the Angulimala mantra. And so the Angulimala mantra mentioned in the questions of King Milinda is probably what scholars say now, and they hypothesize that this is the one from the middle-length discourses from the 86th sutra of the middle-length discourses, the Angulimala Sutra. So they say that it is probably from this Angulimala Sutra. This is their hypothesis. In any case, if we look at the sort of formal aspects, the external forms, similar to the Jataka tales, where there are the words of the true words, and then there's also the words used in the Angulimala Sutra are the same, which are basically the same. It's Tena Satchena. And so basically say tena sachena. So when you say tena sachena, it can be understood as being the true words. And so for this words, and if we look at this, we can say that even in the Pali Canon, there is a question of speaking truly. Because of speaking truly, you could say that, do they use the term true words? You can say, yes, they probably do. But there's a what we call an alternate translation of the connected discourses, and this is in Chinese. So it's the alternate translation of the connected discourses. This is one text. And in the 18th fascicle of this text, there is a discussion of how Angulimala became Buddhist. But this includes no mention of how, after he achieved arhatship, how he recited true words to the women undergoing difficult labor. So there's no discussion of this in the alternate translation of the connected discourses. Now, within the numerical discourses, the 31st sutra is another Angulimala Sutta. And that sutra but this one does not, unlike the one in the middle-length discourses, does not discuss the story of the woman in difficult labor. And from the time that I was born in the noble family, I have not taken life again. By these words spoken from my heart, and spoken genuinely from the bottom of my heart, may the baby be freed from the womb. So it indicates that it's true words. So this is discussed in that. Now this again, it shows that it's true words, but it doesn't actually use the term true word. Likewise, the alternate translation of the sutra and the words of the Buddha, the Sutra of the Angulimala, also include the story. So in the alternate translation, the Angulimala Sutra says, spoken from my heart with no falsehood, so that it uses this phrasing, but the words of the Buddha, the Sutra of Angulimala, say the words from my heart. And so for this reason, we would say that all of these sutras I have just mentioned, except that there is a particular power to true words or to the mantras of true words. So they accept that these. Now the third is, returning the terms of the true words, the third point here is so there's a sutra called the Mahavastu Sutra. The Mahavastu Sutra. So in this Mahavastu Sutra, it's also a Pali Sutra. And in that, it does actually use the term true words. And the way it uses is that within the sutra, there is the Kinnari Jataka. We have kinnaras, right? We have Kinnara spirits, and so in this Kinnari Jataka, there's the daughter, the king of Kinnara's Druma, writes how she had been captured by a hunter and was escaped from them by the power of true words. So in any case, in this Kinnari Jataka, it actually uses the term true words. Likewise, there's also the Shyamaka Jataka. So there's a Shyamaka Jataka. The Shyamaka Jataka tale speaks about how when Shyamaka was struck by a poison arrow, and when he was struck by that, then his father recited true words, and by the power of that, the poison was neutralized. So that's another story. And so this also actually uses the term true words. And so for this reason, we can see that even in the Maheshasaka school, generally accepted that they used true words. They accepted the use of true words. So the Mahavastu Sutra is probably a Maheshasaka sutra. So this is a discussion of the topic of true words in the foundation vehicle, particularly in the Pali scriptures. So next we'd like to speak a bit about the Mahayana. And so how were true words used in the Mahayana Buddhism? So they were in the foundation vehicle there. So how did they spread and how did they continue to be used in Mahayana Buddhism? Another given example of this, at the end of the Prajnaparamita in 8,000 lines, there's a story of, or there's a chapter on the Bodhisattva Sadaprarudita. And so the Bodhisattva Sadaprarudita, in order to seek the Dharma transcendent prajna, went to the Bodhisattva Dharmotkata, and he thought that in order to receive Buddha, the teachings, he needed to be able to make an offering for that. He thought that he should sell his own body in order to make an offering to Dharmotkata. And so and while he is thinking this, the king of gods, Shakra, he understood Sadaprarudita's intentions. In order to test his resolve, he emanated himself in the form of a young man and came to Sadaprarudita. And so this emanation of Shakra said, please give me your heart and give him your blood and some of your bone marrow. You've got the marrow inside a bone, right? You've got the marrow in the bone. It's like we have marrow in yak and sheep bones that we eat, right? So the same. So the emanation of Shakra came and asked the Sadaprarudita, he said, give me your heart, give me your blood, give you your marrow. And so then the Bodhisattva Siddhartha took this really sharp knife, and he first cut his arm, and he extracted some blood, and then he took he took some flesh from his thigh, and he gave him that. And again, he broke his butt, and he was about to take the marrow out of that, and then Shakra was just amazed. And he saw that actually the Sadaprarudita has really incredibly firm resolve. And he immediately he had emanated himself in the form of a young man. And he cast that form off, and he showed himself in his own divine form as the king of gods, Shakra. And he promised to give the Bodhisattva Sadaprarudita whatever things he wished. And when he made that press at the end, he said in order to, the Sadaprarudita had injured himself, he wounded himself, and he was in great pain. And so in order to cure his wounds, or to heal his wounds, he recited these true words, the Satyavachana. And the true words he said, what he said was, basically, if we say it colloquially, if I've reached the state of being, may I'll never be turned back from achieving completely perfect enlightenment. And And by the power of the truth of the Tathagata, of all the Buddhas predicting that I would never be turned back, and I would definitely achieve Buddhahood, and knowing that my ultimate decision is unshakable. If what I'm saying is true, then by the power of that truth, may my body be just as it was before. And when he said these true words, his body was immediately healed. So it was just like before. And this is also called an empowerment or the blessing of true speech. So the term of true words. So we talk of the Satya Vachana. So not only that, we also to talk about the blessings of true words is also used in that term. And the term is Satyadhisthana. And so these true words of this type appear not only, I said it's in the Prajna part of it in 8,000 lines, but in China there are several different translations of this, of the 8,000 lines. So the oldest translation of the oldest translation of the Prajnaparamita in 8,000 lines was translated by a translator named Lokachema. So that's the oldest Prajnaparamita Sutra. But there's also the various the shorter chapters of the Prajnaparamita, the shorter chapters on the Prajnaparamita that was translated by the Jiva. It's 10 fascicles long. And within that, it's one of the oldest translations of the Prajnaparamitas into Chinese. But this does use the term the true words, the power of true words. Likewise, there is a Sanskrit manuscript of the 8,000 line sutra. There's the Tibetan translation. Then there's also the Chinese translation of the Treasury of the Three Dharmas, born of the Victor's Mother, the Sutra Prajnaparamita. So that's what it's called in Chinese. It's 27. It's over 20 chapters long. And so that Prajnaparamita Sutra is in the 24th chapter. There's the term, the power of true words. Likewise, when you talk about the other translation, there's the word of blessings, the Adhisthana. So this word Adhisthana is this word for blessings is a very important word in the secret mantra, and it appears in the 18th verse. This term Adhisthana appears in the 8,000 lines. So in brief, it's in this is what we have in the Mahayana. We think about in the secret mantra, if we think of the secret mantra, in any case, within the Mahayana, as I said before, there's for mantras, there are the protective mantras, the parita, there's the awareness mantras or vidya. So the vidya, so vidya or vidya mantra. And both of these are able to affect other beings, able to exert some power on other sentient beings. And so they're both recognized with this power. But true words were able to exert an even stronger and more immediate capacity. So it seems like the true words had a much greater power than either the protective mantras or the awareness mantras. So at the very end, as to give a summary of this, we were speaking about the other day and today in terms of uh, elements of early Buddhism that are related to the secret mantra. So in early Buddhism, there's, you can say the Vidya, or you can say a Vidya mantra. In any case, awareness or awareness mantras were not 100% or completely forgiven. There were a few that were allowed, that were accepted. There are a few types that were allowed. It's not that every single mantra there was stopped, was prohibited. There are some that were accepted and they were allowed to practice them. And so there was permission to do so. And particularly mantras to protect oneself, the protective mantras, and also the power of true words, whether in the foundation vehicle or in the Mahayana, were accepted, or you could say, allowed. And this is very clear. When you think about the word vidya and awareness, and a Buddha's clear realization and the Buddha's clear wisdom, there's a connection between these two, as I discussed the other day. Similarly, when you think about awareness mantras, protective mantras, and true words, all of these are considered to be among the three secrets of body, speech, and mind. They're considered to be secrets of speech. When you talk about the secret of speech, you could say the secret of speech means like the hidden capacities of our speech. We ordinary peoples like aren't able to know it, but there is this hidden power or hidden capacity of speech. So in the four agamas, not only are these secrets of speech, there are also other secret philosophies, secret thoughts that we can to be encountered. When you're talking about secret philosophies, it's actually to think about the lives of ancient people and modern people are a little different from each other. To give an example, these days, the way, in our lifestyle, we have phones, we have internet, and we have video screens. We have all these different things. These are things that people of ancient times could just hardly even conceive of them. If you think about a telephone or an internet, it's something that people of ancient times could not conceive at all. Likewise, in ancient times, ancient peoples also had would not have been able to consider that we had this development of material and technology that had happened. So we've had that, but in the opposite way of looking is that even though the ancient people didn't have so any development compared to other people, but you could say that if you have, in terms of the internal mind, how do you say it? If you say it in English, I've forgotten my English. In any case, but there's many ancient people spoke about the benefits of the mind. Forget it about this. And the people of a few thousand years ago, even at the time when you're younger, the time of our children, if you think of the way these people thought about things, like when we were young, there was no internet. Particularly in the place where I was, there was no internet or not even any modern development. But the people of that people, with the level of people's thinking, or the way that would other people be able to live like that and think in that somewhere, they probably couldn't. So ancient people had a secret world or a hidden world that modern people would not be able to understand at all, not be able to conceive of. in brief, during the time of early Buddhism, people were able to like have conversations with the gods. And so they would actually have different, if you said, could they have converse with the gods? They would be able to. Even in the four agamis, there are many appearances of gods such as Brahma and Indra. And in particular, later there's one bodhisattva who became very important in later Buddhism. This is Vajrapani. You can call it Vajrapani, so Lakna, you can look at the Vajra in hand. So Vajrapani here is in the four agamas. And in the third sutra of the long discourses, there's the Ambata Sutta in the Pali, and the Ambata Sutta of the Pali long discourses speaks about how there was a Brahmin boy named Amne, and he went to the Buddha, and the Buddha asked this Brahmin boy, and the question is, and he gave three different answers to this, but each time, excuse me, he asked the Buddha a question, but he asked three times, but this boy was not able to, so he basically didn't pay attention. Even though the Buddha, he asked the question three times, but he didn't give an answer. So he didn't pay attention. He was asked three times, and then the third time he did this Yaksha Vajrapani. So Vajrapani, if you think about it in today's language, is like the Buddha's bodyguard. He was like the bodyguard protecting the Buddha. So the Vajrapani said when he didn't answer the Buddha's question three times, Vajrapani got angry. And it took a big oar, and because of a blazing piece of iron, and held it over above the Brahmin boy's head in the air. And the Yaksha Vajrapani, but the Buddha actually said the boy could see the Buddha, and the Vajrapani said, and he made it so that the boy could see this blazing iron ball above the boy's head in the sky. And he said that the Buddha asked you three times, and the question three times, if you're going to ask a question, answer the question or not. If you aren't going to answer it, then I'm going to strike your head with this and split your head into 7 pieces. And so he said these really that's what he said. At that point, the Brahmin boy got really he got goosebumps, and then he went to refuge to the Buddha and says, Buddha, please protect me. And said, please tell me your question more than one, I'll immediately answer you. And then the Buddha then once more asked him the same question, and then he gave his answer. So this is the story. And so this is like the kind of bodyguard that the Buddha had. And so this is like, so in the Pali, who is said to be a yaksha, nothing, it doesn't say anything else. But in the Mahayana, Vajrapani became a very important bodhisattva. And in the secret mantra, the compiler of the secret mantra became Vajrapani, right? And so Vajrapani is extremely important. And so here, and so he also appears in the long discourses in Pali. Similarly, there's also the Tarkajvala of Bhaviviveka. Within this, it speaks about within the Mahasangika school, there's a particular school called the Gangariva school. And within their scriptures, they teach about Avalokiteshvara. And so if we take a look at the school of this Gangadula Depa school, we don't have the scriptures in it, but it was extant at the time of Bhaviviveka, and it does teach about Avalokiteshvara, according to Bhaviviveka. So this is taught in this. So when you think about the secrets of the body, speech, and mind of the bodhisattvas, are something that the Shravakas, that the Shravaka Arhats and Pradeka Buddhas cannot understand it. And the Prateka Buddhas and Avalokiteshvara, the Arhats and the Prateka Buddhas do not know the Buddha's 500 past lives, nor can they know anything about the qualities of Avalokiteshvara. And he said, if you can even remember the name of Avalokiteshvara, this will protect all sentient beings. And so the person who said this, it was said to as Ananda, and the person who said it was the Buddha. And after the Buddha said this to Ananda, then Ananda recited a stanza. The Buddha, so the Buddha is a great, powerful being, and I posted to Avalokiteshvara. And so this is in the sub-school, scriptures of a sub-school of the Mahasangika school. And so in any case, this is a discussion of the seeds of the Mahayana, and particularly the Vajrayana school. And so these seeds are, many of these seeds of these are found in the scriptures of early Buddhism. And so we find them in the scriptures of early Buddhism. And so these are the areas that we've researched, and there are probably many other areas that we have not yet researched that might turn up. So that's enough for now.